Jake Morrison walked through the wide hallways of Harmony Prime, the biggest space station in the galaxy. His boots made soft sounds on the shiny metal floor as he looked around at all the strange sights. Everywhere he turned, there were aliens he had never seen before. Some were tall and thin like walking sticks. Others were short and round like bowling balls with arms. A few looked like they were made of colored smoke that moved and talked. The space station was huge. It had been built to bring together all the different alien races from across the galaxy. Every 10 years, they held something called the Grand Cultural Exposition. This year, Jake was here to represent Earth and all the humans in the galaxy. He was a lieutenant in the Earth Space Force, but today he was not wearing his uniform. Instead, he wore simple clothes and carried a small black case in his right hand. Jake stopped at a big window and looked out at the stars. 5 years ago, humans had first met aliens. It was a big shock for everyone on Earth. The aliens had better ships, better weapons, and better technology than humans could ever dream of. But they had decided to let humans join their group called the Galactic Federation. Jake was not sure why they had done this. Most of the aliens seemed to think humans were not very smart. He turned away from the window and kept walking. The halls were full of aliens doing amazing things. In one corner, there were crystal beings that looked like living diamonds. They were making music by changing the way light moved through their bodies. The sounds were beautiful but very strange. Jake needed a special device to hear it properly, and even then it hurt his ears a little. In another area, some gray aliens with big heads were sharing thoughts directly from their minds. They did not need to talk at all. They just looked at each other and somehow knew what the other was thinking. A crowd of different aliens stood around them, watching with great interest. Jake felt small and out of place. Everyone here seemed to have special powers or amazing abilities. The humans were the only ones who looked normal. They were the only ones who needed to use their voices to talk and their hands to touch things. All the other aliens could do things that seemed like magic. He walked past a food area where aliens were eating things that glowed or moved on their plates. Some of the food was still alive and seemed happy to be eaten. Jake had brought his own food from Earth because most alien food made humans very sick. The main concert hall was in the center of the space station. Jake could hear strange music. Coming from inside, he walked to the entrance and looked in. The hall was enormous. It could hold thousands of aliens at once. Right now, hundreds of different creatures sat in special seats made for their bodies. On the stage, a creature with 6 arms was performing. It looked like a giant octopus, but with fur instead of smooth skin. The creature was moving its arms in patterns while making deep sounds that Jake could barely hear. According to his translator device, this was supposed to be music, but it sounded more like a machine breaking down. The audience seemed to love it. They made their own sounds of approval. Some clicked, some hummed, and others flashed different colors. Jake understood that this was how they clapped, but it looked and sounded very strange to him. Jake looked down at his black case. Inside was his guitar, an old acoustic guitar that had belonged to his grandfather. He had learned to play when he was young, back on Earth in Alabama. The guitar was one of the few things he had brought with him to space. It reminded him of home, of sitting on the porch in the evening, playing songs while the sun went down. He wondered if any of these aliens would understand human music. Their music was so different from anything humans made. It was all about mathematics and science and things that Jake did not understand. Human music was about feelings, about love and sadness and hope. It was simple and came from the heart. 6-armed creature finished its performance, and the audience made their approval sounds. Jake watched as another alien took the stage. This one looked like a tree with a face. It began to grow flowers that sang in tiny voices. The music was pretty, but Jake still felt like he was watching something from another world. He turned away from the concert hall and kept walking through the station. Tomorrow, he would ask the cultural committee if he could perform. He was not sure they would say yes, but he had to try. Humans deserved the chance to show what they could do. Maybe their music was different, but that did not mean it was worse. Jake held his guitar case a little tighter and hoped that someone, somewhere in this big galaxy, would want to hear a simple song from Earth. Jake woke up early the next morning in his small room on the space station. He had not slept well. His mind kept thinking about what he would say to the cultural committee. He washed his face with cold water and put on his best clothes. Today was important. He picked up his guitar case and walked toward the committee offices. The cultural committee had their offices on the top level of the space station. Everything here was fancy and expensive looking. The walls were made of some kind of metal that changed colors as Jake walked past. The floor felt soft under his feet, like walking on clouds. Even the air smelled different here, clean and sweet. Jake found the main office and pressed a button next to the door. A voice spoke to him in perfect English, though he knew it was really an alien talking through a translator. "State your business, human." "Lieutenant Jake Morrison from Earth. I would like to request a performance slot at the Cultural Exposition." The door opened with a soft sound. Jake walked into a large room with a high ceiling. 5 aliens sat behind a curved desk that looked like it was made from one huge piece of blue stone. In the center sat Chancellor Vexto, the leader of the committee. He was tall and thin with gray skin and 4 eyes. 2 eyes were where human eyes would be, and 2 more were on the sides of his head. The other committee members were just as strange. One looked like a giant insect with beautiful wings. Another was covered in soft fur and had a long tail that moved as it thought. The third looked almost human except for having blue skin and no hair at all. The last one was the strangest of all. It seemed to be made of water that held its shape without a container. Chancellor Vexto looked down at Jake with all 4 of his eyes. His face did not show any emotion. "So the human wants to perform. How interesting." His voice was cold and flat. "Tell me, Lieutenant Morrison, what exactly does your species consider to be culture?" Jake felt nervous but tried not to show it. "We have music, sir. Songs that tell stories and share feelings. I play an instrument called a guitar." The insect-like alien made a sound that the translator said was laughter. "Feelings? How primitive. True culture is about higher thoughts, about understanding the universe through pure intelligence." The furry alien nodded. "My people have been creating art for 50,000 years. We express the mathematical beauty of existence through harmonic resonance patterns. What could a species that has barely learned to leave its home planet possibly offer?" Jake opened his mouth to answer, but Chancellor Vexto held up one long finger to stop him. "Human, your species was admitted to the Galactic Federation only 5 years ago. In galactic terms, that was yesterday. Most of our member races have been traveling between stars for thousands of years. They have had time to develop true sophistication." The blue-skinned alien leaned forward. "Your people are known throughout the galaxy for one thing only: war, violence, destruction. You barely qualify as a civilized species. Why should we believe you have anything valuable to contribute to our cultural celebration?" Jake felt his face get hot with anger, but he tried to stay calm. "Sir, humans have been making music for thousands of years. We may be new to space travel, but we are not new to art and culture." The water being rippled, which seemed to be its way of showing amusement. "Thousands of years? Child, some of our art forms are older than your entire species. What you call music is probably just noise to any civilized being." Chancellor Vexto stood up from his chair. He was even taller than Jake had thought, maybe 8 feet high. "Lieutenant Morrison, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but the Cultural Exposition is for advanced civilizations only. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when your people have evolved beyond their violent nature, you might develop something approaching real culture." The insect alien clicked its mandibles together. "The exposition is for races that have transcended basic emotional responses. Art should challenge the mind, not appeal to primitive feelings." Jake felt like he had been punched in the stomach. He had known this might happen, but it still hurt to hear it. "Sir, I just asked for a chance to show you what human music can do." Denied. Chancellor Vextol sat back down. "The exposition schedule is full with performances from truly advanced civilizations. There is no room for amateur hour." The furry alien waved its tail dismissively. "Come back in a millennium or two, human. Maybe by then your species will have something worth sharing." Jake stood there for a moment, holding his guitar case. All 5 aliens stared at him with expressions that ranged from boredom to actual disgust. He realized that to them, he was not just representing himself. He was representing all of humanity, and he had failed. "Thank you for your time," Jake said quietly. He turned and walked toward the door. As the door closed behind him, he heard the water being said to the others, "Honestly, the audacity of these primitive species never ceases to amaze me." Jake walked slowly down the fancy hallway, feeling worse than he had ever felt in his life. The beautiful colors on the walls seemed to mock him now. He had come here with hope, and he was leaving with nothing but rejection and shame. Jake walked away from the committee offices feeling like his heart was made of lead. The fancy hallways that had impressed him yesterday now felt cold and unwelcoming. Every alien he passed seemed to look at him with the same dismissive expression he had seen on the committee members' faces. He did not want to go back to his room. He did not want to sit alone and think about how badly he had failed. Instead, he found himself walking toward the lower levels of the space station. He had explored these areas before, and they reminded him a little bit of home. They were not fancy or beautiful, but they felt real. The lower levels were where all the work got done. This was where the mechanics fixed things, where the cargo got loaded and unloaded, and where the food was prepared for the restaurants upstairs. The hallways here were narrower and the lights were dimmer. The walls were plain metal, not the fancy color-changing material from the upper levels. Jake took an elevator down several floors until he reached the maintenance section. The sounds here were different too. Instead of soft music and gentle alien conversations, there were the normal sounds of work being done. Tools clanking, machines humming, and workers calling to each other in their various languages. He found a quiet corner where some large cargo boxes were stacked up. The area was like an alley between buildings, except it was inside a space station. Jake sat down on one of the boxes and put his guitar case on the floor next to him. A few maintenance workers were nearby, but they were too busy with their jobs to pay attention to him. Jake watched them work and felt a little better. These aliens were not trying to impress anyone. They were just doing their jobs, fixing things and keeping the station running. One of the workers noticed Jake sitting there. He was short and stocky with thick gray skin and 4 arms. His coveralls were stained with oil, and his hands looked like they had been working with tools for many years. "Hey there, human," the alien said in a friendly voice. "You look like someone ran over your pet. What's wrong?" Jake looked up at the alien. "I'm Jake Morrison. I was trying to get permission to perform at the cultural exposition, but they turned me down." The alien wiped his hands on a rag and walked over. "Name's Grex. I'm a mechanic here. Been fixing things on this station for 15 years. He sat down on another cargo box. "So they turned you down, eh?" "Not surprised. Those fancy aliens upstairs think they're better than everyone else. They said humans are too primitive to have real culture," Jake said. "They said our music is just noise." Grex made a snorting sound. "That's rich, coming from beings who think equations are entertainment. I've been to some of their performances. Boring as watching paint dry, if you ask me." Another worker came over. This one was tall and slim with purple skin and large eyes. She was carrying a tray of food containers. "What's going on here, Grex?" "This. Human here got rejected by the cultural committee. They told him his species doesn't have real culture." The purple alien shook her head. "Those stuck-up politicians wouldn't know real art if it bit them on the rear end. I'm Zira, by the way. I run one of the food carts down here." Jake felt a Little better talking to these workers. They seemed more like real people than the formal committee members upstairs. It's not just about me, he said. I was supposed to represent all of humanity. Now they'll think we're all just violent primitives. Grex leaned back against the wall. Listen, Jake, I've worked with beings from all over the galaxy. Some are smart, some are dumb, some are nice, and some are jerks. It doesn't matter what planet they come from, those committee members are just jerks who happen to have fancy titles. But they're right about one thing, Jake said. Humans are new to all this. We don't have the advanced technology or the thousands of years of space travel. Zira sat down on a nearby crate. So what? New doesn't mean bad. Different doesn't mean worse. Jake looked down at his guitar case. Without really thinking about it, he reached down and opened the latches. The case opened with a soft click, revealing his old acoustic guitar. The wood was worn and scratched from years of playing, but it still looked beautiful to him. What's that thing? Grex asked, leaning forward with interest. It's called a guitar, Jake said, lifting the instrument out of its case. It's how humans make music. Zira tilted her head. It looks like a wooden box with strings. How does it work? Jake held the guitar properly and strummed a few chords. The sound echoed off the metal walls of the maintenance area. It was a simple sound, nothing fancy or technological, just six strings vibrating in harmony. Both aliens stopped what they were doing and stared. The sound was unlike anything they had heard before. It was warm and organic, completely different from the mathematical music upstairs or the electronic sounds that filled most of the station. That's actually quite pleasant, Zira said, her large eyes widening with surprise. Grex nodded slowly. It sounds so honest, like it's coming from somewhere real. Jake strummed another chord, then began to tune the guitar properly. As he adjusted each string, the workers around them started to notice the sounds. A few stopped their work and looked over to see what was making such interesting noise. Jake finished tuning his guitar and looked around at the small group of aliens who had gathered. Grex and Zira were sitting nearby, watching with curious expressions. A few other workers had stopped what they were doing and moved closer. Jake felt nervous, but these aliens seemed genuinely interested, not judgmental like the committee members upstairs. What kind of song are you going to play? Zira asked, her purple skin seeming to shimmer with excitement. Jake thought for a moment. He could play something complicated to try to impress them, but that felt wrong. Instead, he decided to play something that meant something to him personally, something from home. This is an old song from my home state, Jake said. It's about the place where I grew up, about belonging somewhere and being proud of where you come from. He placed his fingers on the strings and began to play the opening chords of Sweet Home Alabama. The melody was simple but strong, and it filled the maintenance area with warm, rich sounds. Jake had played this song thousands of times back on Earth, sitting on his porch or around campfires with friends. As the familiar chords rang out, Jake felt some of his sadness lift away. This was what music was supposed to be about, not complicated mathematics or showing off how smart you were. It was about sharing feelings and connecting with other people. Jake began to sing. His voice was clear and strong, carrying the melody with confidence. He sang about rolling on a river, about Sweet Home Alabama, about the place that made him who he was. Even though the aliens could not understand all the words, they seemed to understand the feeling behind them. Something amazing started to happen. More workers began to stop what they were doing. An alien who looked like a walking tree put down his tools and moved closer. Two beings that seemed to be made of colored crystals paused their conversation and turned toward the music. Even some of the more unusual aliens, including one that looked like a floating jellyfish, drifted over to listen. Grex found himself moving his head in time with the rhythm. He had never done anything like that before. His species was known for being serious and practical, but something about this human music made him want to move. This is incredible, Zira whispered to Grex. I can feel what he's feeling. I don't even need my translator to understand what this song is about. Jake noticed that more and more aliens were gathering, but he tried not to let it distract him. He kept playing and singing, pouring all his homesickness and his hope into the music. He sang about Lord turning him around, about the governor and the folks back home. The words might not make sense to aliens, but the emotion was universal. A group of young aliens who looked like they might be students came down from the upper levels. They had probably been taking a shortcut through the maintenance areas when they heard the music. They stopped and stared, fascinated by this human making sounds they had never heard before. One of the crystal beings began to hum along. The sound was different from Jake's voice, more like wind chimes, but it somehow harmonized perfectly with the song. This encouraged other aliens to join in. They could not sing the words, but they hummed and made their own sounds that blended with the melody. The floating jellyfish alien pulsed with different colors in time with the music. Jake realized that this was how its species expressed rhythm. Soon, other aliens began showing their appreciation in their own ways. Some swayed back and forth, others clicked or tapped with whatever appendages they had. Jake felt tears in his eyes, but they were good tears. This was what he had hoped for when he came to the space station. Not the formal approval of the cultural committee, but real connection with other beings. The music was doing what music was supposed to do. It was bringing different people together. As Jake played the guitar solo in the middle of the song, the crowd grew larger. Word was spreading through the lower levels of the station. Aliens were calling their friends and co-workers to come listen to the human making incredible sounds with his wooden box. Grex stood up and began clapping his four hands together in rhythm with the music. He had no idea why he was doing it, but it felt right. Zira joined him, clapping with her two hands. Soon, dozens of aliens were making rhythmic sounds in their own ways. The maintenance area had become something it had never been before. It was a concert hall, a place where beings from across the galaxy were united by simple, honest music from a small planet called Earth. Jake sang the final verse with more passion than ever before. He sang about Sweet Home Alabama, and as he did, he realized that home was not just a place. It was a feeling, and right now, surrounded by these aliens who understood his music, he felt more at home than he had since leaving Earth. Jake finished the first song and looked up at the crowd that had gathered around him. There were at least 50 aliens now, maybe more. They came from so many different worlds that Jake could not even count all the different types. Some were tall, some were short, some had fur, others had scales, and a few seemed to be made of energy or light. The crowd was completely quiet for a moment. Then they began making sounds of approval in their own ways. The crystal beings chimed like bells. The furry aliens purred, and the insect-like creatures clicked their wings together. It was the most beautiful applause Jake had ever heard. "More!" shouted Grex, waving all four of his arms. "Play another song, human." The crowd agreed with excited sounds and movements. Jake felt overwhelmed by their enthusiasm. These aliens wanted to hear more of his music. They were not judging him or comparing him to their advanced cultures. They were just enjoying the simple pleasure of listening to a good song. Jake strummed his guitar and began another song, this one slower and more emotional. He sang about leaving home, about missing the people you love, and about hoping to return someday. As he played, he watched the faces of the aliens around him. Even though they looked completely different from humans, he could see that they understood the feelings in his music. A tall alien with blue skin and tentacles for hair began to sway gently to the rhythm. Next to her, a small creature that looked like a walking mushroom bobbed up and down. Even the more serious-looking aliens seemed to be affected by the music. Jake noticed that some of the aliens were recording him with small devices. At first, this made him nervous, but then he realized they were probably sharing the music with friends who were not there. The thought made him happy. Maybe his music would spread to other parts of the station. As Jake played, he began to talk. to the crowd between songs. He told them about Earth, about the place where this music came from. He described the small towns in Alabama, the hot summers, the friendly people, and the sense of community that made the music possible. This next song, Jake said, is about feeling proud of where you come from, even if other people think your home is not good enough. The crowd grew quiet, listening carefully. Many of these aliens worked in the lower levels of the station, while the important people stayed upstairs. They understood what it felt like to be looked down upon. Jake began playing again, this time with more energy and passion. He sang louder, and the crowd responded by joining in however they could. The crystal beings provided a beautiful harmony with their chiming sounds. The tentacle-haired alien created a rhythm by tapping on a metal pipe. Others hummed or made their own musical sounds. What had started as one human with a guitar had become a full orchestra of alien voices and sounds. Each species contributed something unique, but it all blended together perfectly. Jake had never experienced anything like it in his life. The crowd kept growing. Aliens from all over the lower levels were arriving to see what was happening. Some came because they heard the music. Others came because their friends had called them. Soon, the maintenance area was packed with beings from dozens of different worlds. Jake looked around and saw aliens helping each other get better positions to see and hear. Tall aliens were lifting up shorter ones. Flying aliens were hovering in place so ground-based ones could move closer. There was no pushing or fighting, just a shared desire to be part of something special. In the middle of one song, Jake noticed a group of aliens wearing fancy clothes standing at the edge of the crowd. They looked like they had come from the upper levels of the station. Some were holding small recording devices, and they were watching with expressions of amazement. One of them, an elegant alien with silver skin and multiple eyes, whispered to her companion, "I have never seen anything like this. These workers are actually enjoying themselves. They look happy." Jake pretended not to notice the fancy aliens and kept playing. He did not want anything to break the magic of this moment. The music had created something beautiful, and he wanted it to continue for as long as possible. As he played, Jake thought about the committee members who had rejected him earlier. They had said that human music was primitive and worthless. They had said that true culture was about challenging the mind, not appealing to emotions. But looking at this crowd of happy singing aliens, Jake knew they were wrong. This was what culture was really about. It was about bringing people together, about sharing joy and understanding, about making connections across differences. It did not matter if the music was simple or complicated. What mattered was that it came from the heart and spoke to the hearts of others. The maintenance area had become so crowded that some aliens were standing on cargo boxes to get a better view. Others were sitting on pipes and hanging from the ceiling supports. Jake had never performed for such a large audience, and he had definitely never performed for an audience this strange and wonderful. He was in the middle of playing another song when he noticed some commotion at the edge of the crowd. Security officers were trying to push through the packed aliens, but they were having trouble moving forward. The crowd was not being difficult on purpose. There were just so many beings in such a small space. Jake kept playing, but he watched. The security officers with some worry. Were they here to stop the concert? Had someone complained about the noise? He tried to sing louder and play more energetically, hoping to keep the moment going for as long as possible. The security officers finally made it to the front of the crowd. Jake expected them to tell everyone to leave, but instead they just stood there and listened. One of them, a large alien with thick green skin, began nodding his head to the rhythm of the music. Another officer, who looked like a walking stick, with arms, started tapping his foot. Jake realized that the security officers were not here to break up the concert. They were here because they wanted to hear the music too. This made him smile, and he played even better than before. More fancy aliens from the upper levels began arriving. They pushed through the crowd carefully, trying not to damage their expensive clothes. Jake could see that they were shocked by what they found. These were aliens who were used to formal concerts with assigned seats and quiet audiences. This wild, joyful gathering was completely different from anything they had experienced. One of the upper-level aliens, a creature with beautiful golden skin and flowing robes, spoke to one of the security officers. "What is happening here? We received reports of a disturbance." The security officer shrugged with all 6 of his shoulders. "No disturbance, ma'am. Just a human playing music. Everyone seems to be enjoying themselves. No one is causing trouble." The golden alien looked around at the crowd of workers, students, and now security officers, all swaying and singing along to Jake's music. "This is most unusual. I have never seen such enthusiasm for a cultural performance." Jake noticed that some of the upper-level aliens were starting to enjoy the music too. They tried to hide it at first, standing stiffly and pretending to be unimpressed. But as the songs continued, he saw them begin to relax. Their bodies started moving slightly to the rhythm, and some even began to hum along. The crowd was now so large that it filled the entire maintenance area and spilled out into the connecting hallways. Aliens were recording everything and sending messages to their friends throughout the station. Jake's impromptu concert was becoming the most talked about event on Harmony Prime. During a quiet moment between songs, Jake heard his name being called from somewhere in the crowd. He looked around and saw a familiar face pushing through the aliens. It was Commander Lisa Park, his superior officer from Earth. She had come to the station for the cultural exposition, just like Jake, but she had been attending the formal events upstairs. "Jake," she called out as she finally reached the front of the crowd. "I've been looking all over for you. Someone told me there was a human causing a sensation in the maintenance area." Jake felt embarrassed. "Commander, I can explain. The cultural committee rejected my request to perform, so I just came down here to play for myself. I didn't expect all this to happen." Commander Park looked around at the hundreds of aliens who were hanging on Jake's every word and note. "Jake, do you realize what you've accomplished here? I've been to a dozen formal performances upstairs, and none of them had even a fraction of this enthusiasm." Just then, Jake heard a commotion from the back of the crowd. Aliens were moving aside to make way for someone important. Jake's heart sank when he saw who it was. Chancellor Vextel and the other members of the cultural committee were walking through the crowd, looking very serious and official. The crowd became quieter as the committee members approached. Many of the working aliens looked nervous. They knew these were the important people who made decisions for the entire cultural exposition. Chancellor Vextel reached the front of the crowd and stared at Jake with all 4 of his eyes. His expression was unreadable. Jake stopped playing and lowered his guitar, expecting to be scolded or arrested. "So," Chancellor Vextal said in his cold voice, "this is where the human has been hiding. We received multiple reports of an unauthorized gathering. Some said there was music involved." Jake stood up from his cargo box, still holding his guitar. "Sir, I was just playing a few songs. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." The Chancellor looked around at the enormous crowd of aliens, all of whom were watching him carefully. The air was tense with anticipation. The maintenance area was so quiet that Jake could hear the humming of the space station's engines. Hundreds of aliens stared at Chancellor Vexto, waiting to see what he would do. Jake felt his heart beating fast in his chest. He was sure he was about to be thrown off the station, or maybe even arrested. Chancellor Vexto walked slowly around the crowd, looking at all the different aliens who had gathered. He saw maintenance workers standing next to wealthy tourists. He saw security officers next to important diplomats. He saw beings from dozens of worlds, all brought together by one human with a guitar. "In all my years," the Chancellor said slowly, "I have never seen anything quite like this." Jake waited for the punishment that was surely coming. Instead, Chancellor Vexto did something unexpected. He sat down on one of the cargo boxes, just like the workers had done. "Human," he said, "I owe you an apology." The crowd gasped in surprise. Important officials like Chancellor Vexto never apologized to anyone, especially not to humans. This morning, I told you that your species had no culture worth sharing. I said that true art should challenge the mind, not appeal to emotions. I was wrong. Jake could hardly believe what he was hearing. Sir? Chancellor Vextol gestured to the enormous crowd around them. Look at what you have accomplished here. You have brought together beings who would normally never speak to each other. You have made them happy, made them feel connected. This is what culture should really do. Greg stepped forward from the crowd. Chancellor, this human has done something amazing. His music doesn't need fancy equipment or complicated explanations. It just speaks to your heart. Zira nodded enthusiastically. I felt things while listening to his songs that I've never felt before. I understood feelings that I didn't even know I had. One of the crystal beings chimed in with its bell-like voice. The human's music is simple, but it contains truths that are deeper than any mathematical equation. Chancellor Vextol stood up and faced Jake directly. Lieutenant Morrison, I formally withdraw my earlier rejection. Not only will you be allowed to perform at the cultural exposition, I would like to offer you the opening ceremony of next year's event. The crowd erupted in cheers, clicks, chimes, and roars of approval. Aliens were hugging each other and celebrating as if their favorite team had just won the biggest game of the year. Jake felt tears running down his face. Thank you, sir. But I have to say something. This isn't just about me. Every human has something valuable to offer. We may not have the most advanced technology or the oldest civilizations, but we have hearts. We have feelings. We have the ability to connect with others through simple, honest expression. The Chancellor nodded slowly. You are correct. Perhaps the Galactic Federation has been too focused on technological advancement and not enough on emotional connection. Your species may have something to teach us all. Commander Park stepped forward. Chancellor, if I may suggest, perhaps the cultural exposition could include a new category. Something for art that brings people together rather than just showing off how smart someone is. An excellent idea, the Chancellor replied. We could call it the Universal Connection category. Art that speaks to all beings, regardless of their species or background. Jake picked up his guitar again. Would you like to hear one more song? Something that celebrates all of us being here together? The crowd cheered their approval. Jake began playing a softer, gentler melody. This time, he sang about friendship, about different people coming together, about finding family in unexpected places. As he sang, aliens throughout the crowd began joining in again, each in their own way. Chancellor Vextol found himself humming along, something he had never done in his entire life. The other committee members were swaying to the music, looking more relaxed and happy than anyone had ever seen them. When the song ended, the applause went on for several minutes. Aliens were shouting requests for more songs, asking Jake to teach them the words, and inviting him to visit their home worlds to share his music. As the crowd finally began to disperse, many aliens came up to Jake personally. They thanked him for the music, shared stories about their own homes, and told him how his songs had made them feel. Some even asked if they could learn to play guitar themselves. Chancellor Vextol was one of the last to leave. He shook Jake's hand with a firm grip. Lieutenant Morrison, you have taught me something important today. True culture is not about showing how advanced or intelligent you are. It is about sharing your soul with others and helping them feel less alone in the universe. Jake packed up his guitar, feeling happier than he had in years. He had come to the space station hoping to represent humanity well. Instead, he had discovered that the best way to represent his species was simply to be human. To share the simple, honest, emotional music that came from the heart. As he walked back to his room, Jake could hear aliens throughout the station humming the melodies he had played. His music had found a home among the stars, and for the first time since leaving Earth, Jake truly felt at home in the galaxy.